Hey, Chris.
Hi, Johannes.
Great to talk with you today about the future of software engineering. Let me actually kick off the conversation that I think we both share this fundamental belief that AI has changed everything in software. Exceptional business performance is more and more going to be a function of how well your engineering organization is working, how quickly you can ship, and with what quality you can create software. Yet what we see is that a lot of organizations struggle to ship with the speed and also with the precision of some of the most successful technology companies out there. What would you say, why does software engineering matter?
Software has long moved from just a cost center to a competitive advantage. All companies, most companies in this world are essentially software defined.
Yes.
At the heart of their business is not just a service or a product that they produce, but the software they build and employ to provide that service and to produce their products. It's almost unthinkable. Like every product today comes with an app of sorts, and there's heaps of software in the background required to make anything happen. So the ability to build and deploy that software quickly and at scale is performance defining in a way it's never been.
I really agree. And I think it's very important to not only think about the Googles of the world, as well as Silicon Valley type startups that are using technology, but really look at all of the industries out there. And I feel we are in a time right now where a lot of institutions are changing, where there is a rate of change we have never really seen. Yeah. And that brings a tremendous opportunity also for organizations to reinvent themselves. Yes. And use software to unlock innovation and hopefully surpass a bit the stagnation that sometimes I feel we are also in. I really hope and believe that AI can unlock a lot of innovation across a wide variety of industries out there.
Absolutely. What we see is that AI fundamentally brings the cost of software down. Mm-hmm. And Jensen's paradox means that the moment we bring the cost of anything down, we'll do more of it.
Yes.
Now, more software isn't necessarily better software, but what it does is it increases the rate at which we can iterate and cycle through and innovate. So while we might not necessarily be writing more software, we're very likely going to write better software because we can learn faster, we can move through things quicker. And all of that just happens because of that seismic shift in the cost structure and economics of building software.
And at the same time, we see a democratization of software, also who can access software and use software to ultimately solve their business problems, which I believe people underestimate how large the opportunity is that is in front of us and how much software there will be in the world over the next years. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about a couple of things today. So one, the general implications of what we see right now in the industry with AI on the practice of software engineering. Mm-hmm. Then touch a bit the implications for organizations. Mm-hmm. Here specifically, we don't want to focus on startups that can use every tool that is out there immediately, but we want to talk about organizations that really are pushed now to transform and innovate in order to not being left behind. Yes. And then finally, we want to touch a bit how the role actually of an engineer is changing and share a bit what we see both from our customers as well as internally. How does that sound?
Love it.
Amazing.
Let's go.
So let's talk about the practice first. So I know you very, very dearly to your heart appreciate and love the craft. I think you started engineering when you were 8 years ago.
Long time ago.
So tell me a bit about that journey and how you rediscovered your love to software engineering recently from a different angle as well.
I think I would differentiate of different different elements to the craft overall. There is the development of software, the writing of it, the act of creating code and solving a problem. And then there is the outer layer around that, which is the engineering part of it. The design of software, the recognition of requirements and translating that into a solution. And so many in this field start because of the love of problem solving. It's a form of playing a game, essentially. And instead of moving a character on a screen, you type characters on a screen. That's how it used to be for a very, very long time. Like, since I can remember, it was this artisanal handcrafting of text, essentially, save for autocomplete and code generation, which was for the longest time part of the fun. That's why people got into this. And yes, there's the higher level thinking and the abstraction. What I saw over the years is that the level of abstraction steadily rose. When I started, betraying my age here, it was BASIC and C is what you would write. Yep. Then along came Java, and it was a world opened. All the things you could suddenly do, and abstractions over databases, and so many problems you didn't have to solve anymore because the abstraction on top solved it for you. And yet, all of it was artisanally crafted. And this is really the fascinating thing now, is that we've reached this next level of abstraction, and with that removed the need to write code itself, to type code into an editor. Because this is the thing that gets folks into this craft in the first place, can become a bit of an identity crisis. If it's not me who's creating the code, if it's some other machine, what am I? And we see that play out in real time.
Yes.
If we're completely frank, the code that AI produces does not have that beautiful mind-like structure, that clarity that we all desire. And that, I think, makes this identity crisis even worse, because we've honed this craft, this essentially clarity for so long, and now we're asked to give it up to a certain extent.
That makes a lot of sense. So I think a big part of this also is that fundamentally a lot of things are also not changing. So there is a lot of emotions are evoked, but when you look at really excellent engineers, what they've always done is they're taking a problem, they're understanding the domain of that problem, they're understanding the human on the other side that wants that problem to be solved, and they then solve it independent of the technology.
Yes.
Independent of the programming language,
yes.
Independent of the tools they are using. They really want to solve that problem. And I think what we are more and more seeing, also generally when we think about the practice, there is a push towards things that always have been, best practice or standard, having high test coverage, having that customer empathy, having that product engineering mindset, that are now becoming more and more and more important.
Yes.
So when you think about the core practice of software engineering, how do you believe that will shape up and evolve going forward? What will change and maybe what doesn't?
Here you touch on the second part of what I just described, where the developer who identifies with writing code is having a really hard time. The engineer rejoices, because the ability to solve a problem, the ability to create value and to get something into the hands of users now has tenfolded.
Yes.
So if you're in the game because you enjoy writing the code, your economic outlook is not rosy. If you're in the game because you want to solve problems, there is no better time to be exercising this craft.
And I think that is what we really see, is this refocus of people that have that problem-solving mindset.
Yes.
They are really accelerated, and they're really enjoying the opportunity and the possibility that using AI tools gives them right now. Whereas if you're stuck in that, I define myself, I wrap my identity around writing every single line of code, it will be very difficult. And I think that touches on a very, very important transformation that has to happen. both for individual roles, but also when you think about organizations and how we structure organizations to cater to that persona.
One very immediate way in which this shows up is when we look at different seniority levels in the industry, we notice that there is this progression from developer to engineer.
Yes.
From someone who wants to solve the small problem very precisely to someone who wants to solve the bigger picture. And as the developer role is becoming maybe less relevant, we will face a challenge of how do we get enough engineers? How do we level people up through the ranks? And I think there is a lot of potential here as well. If, as someone who is starting out in this field, you directly engage with the larger problem solving, you learn the structure, you operate at that level of abstraction, you might even have a leg up on those who went through the handwriting years because you possibly think larger and think more aligned with what the tools of this age, that is AI, can actually do.
Let's actually flip the order a bit and talk about the individual role right now, because we already started with that, which I think is very, very interesting and exciting, because it ultimately always starts with the person that is creating software. So what we see internally a lot, and I think we've structured our engineering organization already like a while ago around what we call product engineers, where definitely writing software is part of the job, but a big part of the job is also connecting, really connecting with the customer, connecting with the true need of the customer and the problem that they want to solve as well. Can you share a couple of best practices that have helped us shape our internal engineering organization that we learned over the last years?
Yeah. We very deliberately turn our engineering organization in product design engineering. There isn't even a comma between that. Because fundamentally, engineering itself is a means to an end.
Yes.
It's a means to solve a problem. So it all begins with truly understanding that problem. And we cater to software engineering organizations. As it turns out, we don't necessarily care so much about software. We care about humans writing software.
Yeah.
And so we need to understand humans first. That's exactly why we make it a point that everyone within product design engineering, within PDE, joins customer calls,
Yes.
is on the front lines. We very deliberately do not introduce roles that abstract engineers away from our customers, from the product. With that, of course, comes an increased demand towards engineers. You're no longer just here to solve a deep technical problem.
Yes.
And we also need to acknowledge that some of these roles are still necessary.
100%.
It's important for people to be able to spike on certain dimensions. But what we're really looking for is for people who can deeply empathize with our customers, with their needs. And when it's software engineers, that's usually straightforward. We're software engineers ourselves. When it's engineering leaders, all the way up to leaders who run an organization of 10,000 people, that's harder to do. And yet, we ask our engineers to not just solve tickets, but really understand the need behind the ask. So I think the key difference between a software engineer and a product engineer is what motivates them. The software engineer is motivated by solving a deep technical problem or solving maybe a business problem even.
Yes.
The product engineer is motivated by solving the problem of a person. We fundamentally don't care about software, we care about humans writing and using software. And so the product engineer wants to improve someone's life at the end of the day. And what we see a lot within our own organization is that people directly want to be in the call when they ship a first version. They want that direct feedback. They want to see the light in our customers' eyes, and they want to see the frustration when things don't work. So it's a deep human connection that comes with writing software that way that might not even fall in what people would traditionally consider a software engineer.
For me, I think high range is something what we have seen internally that I think will be very important. And when we talk about that, it is exactly what you described. It is like a certain empathy for the customer. It's the ability to connect, to put yourself into the shoes of somebody else, look at a problem from different angles. Having also a certain amount of taste as part of that, because ultimately we are creating products that other people are using. That relates to performance, how quickly things show up. That relates to how deeply do I understand the oftentimes even emotions the other person is in when they interact with the end result or the user experience of the product. And that also relates to the source code itself. One extreme is that beauty that you described, but there are also a couple of principles that it really, really is important for people to follow to get software that is high quality and can be maintained and improved over time at the velocity that our industry and the times we are in requires. Put yourself in the shoes of somebody who is building a team at one of those organizations with tens of thousands of people right now. So we spoke about high range, we spoke about taste. What other qualities would you hire for?
I would optimize for high range, taste, curiosity. So not being set in one's ways, but truly embracing the rapid rate of change that this industry is subjected to right now. And the desire to solve real world problems rather than trying to create that beauty and clarity of thought that we alluded to earlier. That's not the traditional profile. We used to separate these qualities into different roles. Dedicated product managers, dedicated designers, dedicated engineers that solve the deep technical problems. And I'm not here to say that these roles will go away or dissolve entirely, but they'll certainly change. I think they'll we'll expect more people to do more of these previously disjoint roles in unison. And it makes a lot of sense. The more that can happen in one brain, the less lossy communication is needed to fulfill the same function. And with AI, what happens is that previously specialized knowledge and practice now becomes available to individuals, and hence we expect this range to be found in more people.
I love the sense of wonder, the curiosity aspect that you mentioned. One quality I would add is high agency. So I think in that world where there is more and more possible, you also want to have people that have the agency and the sense of empowerment to change things, to use the various tools and possibilities that are available to ultimately drive change.
Absolutely.
And I think that is something that organizations really should think about, also how to structure themselves in order for those people to thrive, of course, attract them in the first place. When we go one level now even deeper, we spoke about the qualities, but how does the actual work change? Describe a bit how the actual workflow is changing. We have the analogy internally, we talk a lot about how our software engineer moves towards being a software conductor. Explain a bit how that workflow is altering.
Until now, software engineering was a deep mono-focused activity. You would focus on one thing at a time, and you would do so very, very deeply. Once it was clear what needed to be built, it's a matter of building it, which previously meant engaging with an interface that an IDE, a program that is meant to get you into the flow, to get you into a place where you can focus on just one thing. That's a very labor-intense process. And the only way to scale this process is to scale it across people. And the fundamental shift now is that AI, specifically software engineering agents, become more and more autonomous. Autonomy in itself isn't valuable. What makes it valuable is that with that, a single person can now work on multiple things at the same time. So in order to turn autonomy into productivity, we now need to do multiple things at the same time. If I need to sit there and watch an agent do its thing, I didn't actually gain productivity. So the shift that needs to happen, that software engineers need to embrace, is instead of doing one thing at a time, you're now asked to do 5 things at a time.
Can you describe a bit how you write software today? because I think obviously we are biased. We're heavily dogfooding Ona. I think at this point, 82% of our lines of code that are merged in main are written by Ona. And the workflow is very much of writing down intent and having Ona do tasks in a almost fully autonomous fashion. I would say it gets, for some things, it gets like to 100%. For something, it gets to 80, 90%, and there is some final human touches. But describe a bit how we work right now, which completely changed within a span of 2 weeks initially.
Yeah. If someone had told me just at the beginning of this year how we'd be working mid-September, I would not have believed them. The fundamental shift is that so many of the functions that previously I or some of my team members would need to fulfill, Ona can take now.
Yes.
So very concretely, I use Ona for a range of different tasks. For example, to research and understand the current state of the implementation, as in preparation for writing documentation, in preparation for writing a design document, just helping me understand changes that have gone into the system. The rate of change has increased so dramatically that it's impossible to keep up by simply manually trying to stay on top of the code base. Every Monday, I run Chris Weekly Digest, a prompt that I curated that tells me what has happened last week.
Yeah.
Are there any security relevant changes? Have we introduced new dependencies that I should be aware of?
What's the code churn in files that...
Exactly. How does the test coverage evolve? What's the overall quality and health of the code base? Previously, that would have taken me probably a number of meetings and hours to assess that manually. Now it happens while I get my coffee. So there is this class of inquiry and understanding the code base. The other is, based on that inquiry, coming up with designs. We've followed a reasonably traditional process where we try and capture what is it that we want to build in a product requirements doc, and from that derive a design doc that decides how to implement something. This process, specifically the creation of a design doc, now is largely automated. Ona will do that for me. Following the inquiry, it's going to design a solution, and I have a conversation with Ona, much like I would have had with a colleague. From this design doc, then comes an implementation plan, which Ona will execute on over the span of mere hours instead of previously days. So that's one class. The other, which I find almost more helpful, is the ability to remove so many of the small paper cuts, which previously would have sunk to the bottom of the backlog and would have been utterly forgotten.
Ken Beck will be very happy with his tidy first.
We tidy first.
Tidy first.
Absolutely.
New world.
We tidy a lot. We have an operating principle. We bring clarity to messy drawers. We open the drawer. We do that in our own software all day long now. And it's really empowering. Because before, needing to add something to the backlog was almost a depressing thing, because it was a lie to our future selves. You know, we would add something to the backlog in full knowing that we will never fix it. But now, instead of making it a ticket, I tell Ona to do it. And half an hour later, I have a pull request of 100 lines and it's fixed. It's really a fundamentally different way of evolving a code base, a product.
We are recording this at one of our offsites, and we had our largest customers here with us as well, joining a session yesterday from our product engineering organization around how Ona uses Ona. So demonstrating their own workflows. And the level of wow and astonishment from them has been really, really interesting. It was very, very fascinating to witness. One thing that is though different is we can already embrace and move at that speed. One, because we built Ona. And for engineers that work at those companies, the work and life looks very different. Oftentimes, the amount of time they actually spend coding is very, very small compared to being in meetings and being at other places. And it was a very nice discussion that evolved yesterday around people asking Ona to do things also when they're on the go. We have this internal joke around taxi-driven development or plane-driven, so TDD, the new version of TDD, or plane-driven development, where you can really embrace the delegation. And I think that is like a mental switch we really encourage people to do. It's just ask Ona. And really think AI first. So think about, can you delegate that task to somebody else? And I think we see a lot of success also within larger companies to embrace that thinking, because there is so much toil, and there is a lot of time wasted that actually, could be used in a more efficient way. And using that delegation mechanism provides surprising results and really helps people to understand that I do not have to write every single line of code. I really can hand off. And I think that's like a very powerful frame to think about.
That is one of the skills to learn, is how to communicate well. It used to be framed as you need to learn how to prompt well. I think this is misguided. You need to learn how to communicate well.
Yes.
It is amazing how much context we take for granted when we speak. And this shared context simply doesn't exist with agents. Maybe it doesn't exist yet, who knows? But it certainly doesn't exist today. So the challenge becomes conferring all this context, being precise in what you're asking, which is a skill that isn't just useful for talking to an agent, it's also very useful for speaking with humans.
And I think it's very important to carve out those use cases where you can ease in, because the change is quite significant. So I think it's very important to think about in those things that just come very natural. Another one of those is where you are now able to explore your creativity in a way wider range. So you can just ask Ona to explore a couple of routes. You just literally are on your phone, type things in there in the morning, or whenever you have an idea when you're on the go, to then be able to pick up that idea in with far more depth already, where you essentially already have a brainstorming partner that took that initial thought and spark of creativity and then takes that and provides an outline for you that helps continue and drive your thinking. So that's also something we really found people enjoying a lot. It's this, almost like a to-do list on steroids in a way.
A to-do list that actually does the work that's on it.
Yeah, that also actions it.
That also actions it. A very direct outcome that we've seen from our own use of Ona, you already mentioned the 83% of code that we merged to main. What I found fascinating is looking at the throughput of changes, at the speed with which we can move now.
Yeah.
We are 2.5 times faster than we were without Ona.
With almost the same amount of people.
With almost the same amount of people and with the same, even improving level of quality.
Yeah, mean time to recovery went down.
Absolutely. And our deploy time has gone up considerably. So if you look at, say, traditional DORA metrics, our performance is increasing by several factors, by several times. If we just look at throughput, it is absolutely fascinating to look at the commit graph and at the number of changes merged, where we can see a very clear switch point. And it's when the natural adoption of Ona and the full embrace of AI happened within the organization. What we really want is to bring this same experience to the customers we serve. That's fundamentally what we're here to do, is to bring the same acceleration, the same explosion of creativity, the same empowerment, the same level of connection that can now be created because you're no longer deeply stuck in code to our customers.
You spoke a bit about the identity crisis, and that is just a function of the rate of change that is happening. And a big part of our job in designing the product is creating an experience that is really joyful, exciting, and fun, and helps people actually also to ease into that. And I think that was very, very important when we designed the product, that we are not forcing people to live in the future. They always have the opportunity to interact with the environments that we create, also with their IDs. At the same time, they can connect and interact with the environment through a conversational interface, through their phone, through text with Ona. We also have VS Code in the browser, which I think also helped a lot of customers to ease into that transition and not force people to be living in the future. And I think change management, also on an individual basis, is something that is extremely important as folks are going through that AI transformation and become agent-pilled.
I think if we move this to the collection of people, the organization that creates code, fundamentally AI acts like a jet engine that gets strapped to a plane. Either your airframe is rigid enough and then you're going to go as fast as you've never gone before, or you're going to come undone in midair. And that same metaphor applies to software engineering organizations, to the groups of people that build software. If you have good practices in place, if you have good standardization in place, for example, around the tools that people use and how they can get a hold of them, around the processes with which you can transport this degree of empathy and knowledge and perspective that can fuel folks with that wide range into an organization of 10,000, then you're going to be immensely successful with AI. If those things aren't true, if you don't have a homogeneous landscape, if you're fragmented across thousands of repositories, each of which uses different technology, each of which uses different processes, each of which has different ways of defining requirements and feeding that into the machine, you're going to have a really hard time with AI. So the very first step that, as a quality for engineers in this day and age, I think is required, is to embrace this standardization, is to embrace this drive towards a common methodology and way of working.
Let's talk a bit about that and the organizational impacts of this. So we have a product we sell, we have a platform we sell, we automate and standardize your environments, we give you the interface to interact with Ona, which is an AI software engineer that works with and for you, and also through various other means. But at the end, what we really sell and the value we provide to our customers is that we are partners to them.
Yes.
We are really helping them on a year-long journey to drive that transformation. And I always look at us as an extension of their team. Talk a bit about that. How can we help them to drive change within their organization?
The first thing I think is to recognize that change is hard for most organizations, especially when it comes at them at a pace, at a rate that we're experiencing right now. We try and help with that at several layers. One is the product you already mentioned, where we try and provide an environment that feels familiar, that feels like home in a way, from which you can then enter into this extended set of capabilities that's available to you. As an industry, we pendulate between decentralized control and centralized control, between every engineer for themselves, make your own decision, choose your own tool stack, all the way to almost calcified, centralized control. Right now, the pendulum is swinging towards standardization. We're far away from the calcification of it. We're pendulating sensibly towards standardizing our infrastructure, the tools that we use, the methods with which we operate.
Which ultimately, I think, gives people the empowerment to be high agency and drive decisions. And I think what you mentioned there, I really agree with that. I want to highlight that point, is that our customers that are most successful really think about their, let's call it AI transformation when it comes to their engineering organization in a very strategic and also structured way. And I think there are a couple of phases that you can look at and how they approach the problem. And it almost always starts by getting the house in order. There is wide variety, oftentimes, of different workflows, programming languages. And as you said, over the last years, there was a very strong push towards standardization. And I think that is something we've really learned and excelled at. So we start with really securing and standardizing the foundation, both for human workflows, but also for the workflows of software engineering agents or AI and software engineers. Talk a bit about how we actually concretely do that, tactically do that.
So a key challenge is the zoo of different technologies that exists in many large organizations. And with that comes a lot of configuration work. Comes a lot of complexity that directly translates into time wasted for engineers to set up and configure their development environment. To the tune of 4 to 5 hours per engineer and week. What we do is we turn these typically outdated README files that engineers have to go off into machine executable code. And we've built a platform that can instantiate this machine readable definition and create as many instances of a perfectly set up development environment within seconds. And that acts as a standardization layer that gives also central teams control over the versions and tools that are sanctioned and can be used throughout the organization. So instead of every engineer having to maintain their development environment for themselves, this now becomes a centralized service that also makes it quicker to remediate CVEs, to adapt to new technologies in ways that previously would have directly impacted individual engineers' time.
We sometimes talk about those environments as laptops from a tissue box. They're just like extremely reproducible, pre-configured setup machines and powerful machines that come with all the tools, with all the dependencies engineers require. And I think the thing that you mentioned is true. Those things are a productivity booster for humans. They are the requirement for any agentic workflow, because in that case, machines interact with machines. And you cannot go as an agent, at least not yet, I don't know what the humanoids will do, to an Apple store and buy yourself your own laptop. So I think like defining those policies as code, defining your golden paths to that, and defining base images that capture the flavors of your programming languages with a set of secured tools and dependencies are really the foundation for any AI strategy down the line.
What you said there, I think, is extremely important. The standardization of these dev environments is very helpful for humans, and it's existential for agents. And it's not maybe immediately obvious why that is. Running agents on a laptop is a very insecure thing to do. Because the agent can interact with its surrounding environment. It can read files, it can execute programs, and you don't want that to happen in a place where you have access to your production systems, where you have access to your email, where you have access to other company-wide systems. You want that to happen in an environment that is isolated and secured for this particular use case. Otherwise, a user needs to permit every action the agent performs. And as we've touched on earlier, the way we turn autonomy into productivity is by doing multiple things at the same time. If as a human, I need to permit an agent to perform each and every step, I cannot meaningfully do multiple things at the same time. Hence, it's a necessity that agents run in a secure environment in which they can exercise that autonomy.
Yes, I fully agree. Okay, so we spoke about phase one, which is standardized and secure and built out the foundation. Phase two then is what we call, and also in collaboration with our customers, what we call remove toil. Can you talk about why that is important after we have established the foundation?
There are a lot of things that software developers and engineers have to do, but don't necessarily enjoy doing. It's keep the lights on kind of work. It's toil. Updating dependencies, mitigating the latest NPM vulnerability, migrating to a new version of your tool stack, or adopting the latest coding guidelines. None of these are things that engineers particularly enjoy. They're not necessarily directly value-creating activities.
Reviewing PRs. There's some engineers that enjoy that, nitpicking, but...
Some enjoy that. PR review is a really interesting one. So most engineers don't enjoy it, and subsequently don't do it well either. Enjoyment is efficiency, and so unless you enjoy something, you're not that likely to do it day in, day out. And we see that with our customers too, where pull requests or merge requests get very few reviews. They're certainly not a good vehicle to uphold coding standards. They also fail as a compliance control because many of these PRs get rubber stamped. Looks good to me, no comment, get it in. And hence they fail in their function to uphold quality standards. That too is perceived as toil. This is where Ona then is immensely helpful because the AI engineer can do that work instead of a human engineer. We have a feature that we call workflows where whenever a pull request gets opened, Ona will come in and do that review. When a CVE comes out, Ona is used to effect change across many hundreds of repositories to mitigate that CVE. And it's not as simple as just bumping a version in some dependency file. there are a lot of repercussions that can come with that. APIs might change, there may be downstream breaking changes that you now have to work on. And Ona does a fine job at getting 80, 90% of the way there. It's not always 100%, but it saves a lot of the time that an engineer or engineers would otherwise need to spend on that toil effort.
And one thing I want to emphasize, this is really a cultural phenomena as well, to help your engineering organization to embrace that new future. So whenever you can be helpful, whenever you can remove things that people do not want to do, you win. Because that is a very, very easy way for people to accept there is a new way of working. And there is now, in this case, Ona taking the chores out of their day-to-day, which really helps them ease into that new world. Another thing that because we have the environment, which is interactive, specifically for PR reviews, found extremely helpful, is that for every pull request or merge request review, you then have the opportunity to not just look at the code diff of what the agent proposes, but actually with one click get into a full-fledged and pre-configured environment where you can see the past history and context of the changes that have been done by Ona, and can take over and interact with that environment as well to drive the pull request to completion. So we also really found it very helpful, almost as an internal viral growth tactic within those organizations, to get to those places where engineers already work, tie into those existing workflows to help them then ease into that new world.
You make someone's life easier, they're going to like you. That's a very fine way to win the hearts and minds of people.
100%. So phase 1, securing, standardizing the foundation. Phase 2, remove toil. What is phase 3?
Phase 3 is acceleration. Once these touch points have been created, once folks are eased into this new way of working where AI does a lot of the hands-on stuff, if you so like, it now becomes natural that Ona is used for more and more tasks.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we see, where engineers move from being the ones that write the code to being a conductor for AI engineers that write the code. And that shift then becomes natural because at this point, typing code is toil too. Yeah. It's a really fundamental shift where the literal typing of code becomes too much effort. Once you see the amplification, the velocity that AI engineers bring to the table, and at this point you have seen it because toil has been removed for you, it becomes almost a desire to apply this to more and more operations in your work.
Yeah, and for me, when I look at the acceleration phase, there are really like two components of that. One is the individual component, which you touched on. It is moving from thinking about a software engineer more towards communicating and embracing what we call that software conductor workflow, where you orchestrate those multiple workflows and manage Ona in a way so it is productive for your day-to-day. So that's the individual component. And then also we have now a centralized component, which we didn't have in the past. And that means you can enact bulk changes across your fleet of repositories. Yes. So we have customers with hundreds of thousands of repositories, literally hundreds of thousands of repositories. Wild. And this is the first time that we have the capability to interact with all of them and add metadata files, add dev container or dev container JSON files in order to standardize those repositories, add automations YAMLs files, which is our proprietary way to configure and set up those environments and automate them, get insights from those repositories, both from a security perspective and as well from an engineering productivity perspective, where you can really create those multi-step workflows where Ona as an agent is interacting with those environments and can do and enact change and drive software changes there. And also be proactive, which I think is also a very important part of that acceleration. We are in that world right now where we move more and more and more from reactivity towards proactivity, also in AI. So imagine you wake up and Ona already went through your repository and suggests a couple of very minor fixes, very small iterative code changes that help clean up and increase the hygiene and quality of that code base. And this is a reality right now.
Absolutely. You touched on a part that I think is really important, which is the ability to generate insights into these repositories.
Yes.
One is affecting change across that fleet. The other is first understanding where are things at and where are things trending.
Yeah.
Especially for large organizations where the repositories have grown tremendously, the number of repositories has grown tremendously over the past years. Very often there isn't a clear line of sight of how does my ecosystem look like right now. And so a very first step in that acceleration phase also is gathering data, is understanding the lay of the land. And previous methods were surveys or brittle, hard-coded heuristics that you would apply to this swath of repositories. Now, with workflows, we can set a fleet of agents to go and inspect these repositories, bring that data back, and produce a report. And we can not only do that once, but we can do that continuously.
Yes.
So you don't get a one-shot every half-year perspective of how your technology landscape looks like, but you get a continuous view of where you're trending. What a lot of our customers care about is also what's the ROI of all of this. We're in the acceleration phase. How much are we really accelerating?
Yeah.
And a key measure for that is literally the throughput. What's your rate of change?
Yes.
Obviously, this needs to be balanced with, are we trending, are we working on the right things?
Yes.
Quality. The key element, though, is this acceleration of the overall process.
Yes.
And with this continuous perspective on your landscape, on your software development landscape, you get that North Star that you can track towards, and you get the data that's needed to drive this acceleration phase. It's not just about speed, it's about velocity. It's about how fast can you go, and are you going in the right direction?
Yes. And setting that direction.
And setting that direction. And without workflows, it's immensely hard to get that kind of data at the accuracy needed to really drive that change in the acceleration phase.
And we've went through that playbook now with a couple of our customers, also in a very consultative and partnership-heavy approach, where we really are on-site, forward-deployed, very closely working with those companies and have seen amazing results already. So on the throughput level, we have customers that 4x'd their engineering throughput. Measured by PR per engineers, definitely not a perfect measure, but together with quality metrics is indicative of what you can achieve. And we have seen the same in our organization over the last quarter.
Yeah, this step function, it's almost a step function.
Yeah.
Once engineers see the velocity amplification that comes about by being a conductor of AI engineers, once they see what impact that has in the real world, there is no holding back.
So it's almost addictive.
It is addictive. It is addictive. It's also one of the most empowering things.
Yes.
The 4x that you mentioned, the property that really fascinates me is that customer is in a highly regulated industry. CMMI level 4, it's
level
immense.
5.
They're level 5. I stand corrected. CMMI level 5. They spend almost more time writing documentation than they spend writing code. And they see a 4x improvement on throughput. Had someone told me that 10 years ago, I would not have believed it. 2 years ago, I would not have believed it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very exciting to partner with companies in that space. And I really believe that this is or can be a moment where institutions, larger organizations that struggled in the past with having the velocity and also the quality and precision of their software to make software a competitive edge, really now have the ability to do that and are not risking to being left behind as everything is changing.
By standardizing, removing toil, and accelerating, it is possible, and we see our customers embrace that full-heartedly to mitigate that risk and accelerate a large organization to speeds unknown before.
As a last question, for you personally, as a person, what excites you most about when you look at the next 5 years inside of software engineering?
It's that Cambrian explosion of creativity. The ability for so many more people to express ideas in ways previously unknown. If we look back, when we look back in 5 years, we'll look back at this point in time And hindsight is 2020. Understand that this was really the switch point, the impetus that led to the creation of so much more software. And as software is the accelerator, the equalizer that underpins so much other innovation in this world, this will be the impetus that will accelerate human progress like nothing else has ever done.
I fully agree. And I think also for us, what is very exciting is that we do not only bring that to individual people that can use over the weekend whatever they want, but we really bring that to organizations and solve their hard organizational enterprise problems that are oftentimes not that easy to solve and quite painful, both for us and also for them. But if you do that, if you look in the faces of those people, they are extremely grateful. Yeah. And I think it's very grounding to understand that 99% of the creators of software out there are working in those institutions. And if we can give them the tools, the culture, and also the partnership to unlock and drive change within those organizations, it's a massive impact that we can have both on society, the economy, and also break a lot of the stagnation that is right now happening in the world.
Absolutely.
Let's go.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Okay. Good.